Okay, hi guys, this is me. I'll just show you that I'm a real person, and I'll stop the video. But I really wanted to share a couple of things with you about Chapter 2. So I know the Connect does a really good job of explaining a lot of the concepts, but I happened to notice that there was one that they didn't really talk about that I wanted to make sure that you understood. So I'm going to share a couple of slides with you. Okay, so over here, this is part of the PowerPoint that you'll find on Blackboard, but really the nuts and bolts of Chapter 2 is all about costs. Costs, and more costs. So what I've done is underlined in the different learning objectives, really the kind of which part of the cost equation that we're really talking about. So I wanted to make sure that you understood that that's why there were some underlines here, just to make sure. Okay, so I'm going to skip right to the part. This is actually Learning Objective Chapter 4. So one thing that I wanted you to understand is that there's a total cost equation that goes behind everything that's reported, and part of that is a fixed cost and part of that is a variable cost. And one of the things that I wanted you to understand is that I just used an electric bill as an example here, that part of the costs that are made up of a lot of our, it's very common that the total cost is made up of both a fixed cost and a variable cost. I used to use like a cell phone example because my cell phone used to have like a plan, and you know, like for example, a data plan, and if I go over a certain amount of data, then they charge me per you know, kilobyte that I use or whatever. So, but anyway, the same is true of my electric bill. So if you look at my electric bill, there's a total cost for my electric bill, but it's made up of a couple of components. One of them is the fixed cost, which is a base charge, for example, and then there's a variable cost. So for me, I actually looked up my electric bill because I didn't know, and it turns out that my base charge is $37 a month, and that covers me up to 300 kilowatts. So if I go over that, then I go into a different tier. Now there's several different tiers that are associated with electric bills. I'm not going to get into the details of that. I just wanted you to get a small example here of how even something so simple as my electric bill is actually a mixed cost. That's what we call it. Okay, so it's $37 a month, and then after the 300 kilowatts that I use, it's 10 cents per kilowatt hour after that base. Okay, so in general, a fixed cost in total doesn't change. So actually I said 37 here. I'm just going to round it up to 50 just to make it an easy example. But anyway, so my base charge is $50 a month. Doesn't matter if I use 1 kilowatt or 1,000 kilowatts. I always get that base charge of $50. Now, fixed cost per unit will go down. So the example that I showed you here is, let's say I only use 1 kilowatt per hour. My base charge is still that $50, right? So basically that 1 kilowatt that I used cost me $50. However, let's say, for example, I used 50 kilowatts, then those kilowatts basically cost me $1 per kilowatt, right? So $50 base charge divided by the 50 kilowatt hours that I use, $1 a kilowatt hour. Okay, so that's why I'm saying up here, the total fixed cost remains the same. However, the fixed cost per unit goes down. Okay, so you may want to take a couple of minutes and think about that. That's what's great about these YouTubes. You can stop them, pause them, reverse them, rewind them, look at them. All right, so let's look at the variable cost. Okay, so in total, the variable cost will obviously change. If I use 1 kilowatt hour beyond my base, it's going to cost me 10 cents. If I use 50 kilowatt hours beyond my base, it's going to cost me $5, right? So however many kilowatts I use, the total variable cost will go up. Remember, that's opposite of what happened with my fixed costs, where my fixed cost total stayed the same. My fixed cost, the total variable cost will go up. Okay, however, the variable cost per unit will stay the same. It's always 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Okay, I hope that is clear as mud. So I just gave you an example here. Let's say for my electric bill, I use 700 kilowatt hours. So my base charge is that $50. Okay, my fixed cost per unit, oh, bad example because I actually used 600 there, is $1.2, okay? But my total variable costs go up based on how many kilowatt hours I use. So for example, if I had a 700 kilowatt hour bill, then it would the total variable cost of that would be $40, which is 400 units beyond the 300 base at 10 cents a kilowatt hour. That's $40. So my total electric bill would be what? It would be $50 for the base charge plus $40 for the variable. So my variable cost per unit was always 10 cents. This fixed cost per unit will go up and down depending on how many kilowatt hours I use. Okay, so this is just kind of a summary of that. So in total, my total variable costs change as the activity level change. The more kilowatt hours I use, the higher my costs will be. Total fixed cost remains the same regardless of the activity level, okay? As opposed to the per unit for variable cost, the per unit will always remain at that 10 cents, but the average cost per unit for fixed costs will go down as the activity level goes up. All right, so I hope that makes sense to you. And in the next slide, what I'm going to do is go over some of your exercises. So stay tuned for another video.